Devils Wednesday. This is the State of the Fan Address, presented by Pucks and Pitchforks blog. Oh yeah, we got the editor-in-chief in here, my co-host, Nick Villano. I'm your host, Sam Wu. We're streaming live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Twitter Live, and Twitch on the Primetime Radio Network. This is episode 110, titled Flipping the Bird. Yeah, flipping the bird. I like that. I like that attitude. How are you, Nick?
I'm good, and that's what I want to talk to you about, because I think we're going to be on different sides of this. I think that's the point, but I'm excited to talk about birds, robins and blue jays and cardinals and the ilk, and I'm excited to talk about where you should put your money. Where's your money going to go, Sam? We need a rooting interest in this NHL Stanley Cup playoffs, and we don't have one right now. So why don't we bet with our money? So that's why we got Matt Russell from Action Network on the horn tonight. He's going to be around 9:05 is when he's going to end up on the phone. So excited about that. But Sam, so your initial reaction to Yegor Sharangovich flipping off the Slovakia bench, is he like that? You like your captain flipping people off?
Well, look, I look at it from a selfish point of view. We've been over this about the Devils not having an identity. They're too soft. And maybe Yegor Sharangovich learned something or two while playing in New Jersey. That's just the way we talk, right?
It's true. It's true. That's how I say it. That's how we had to handshake with COVID, right?
Yeah.
There's no more handshakes, so we had to just flip people off. That's how we say hello.
Oh, yeah. And it's also saying, hey, we're number one. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. We are the number one most commented New Jersey Devils podcast. That's how he was saying.
Number one.
Yegor Sharangovich knows that the Let's Go Devils podcast is global. So he was just explaining to the Slovakians, hey, there's this really good podcast that you should go comment on. It's number one. That's what he was saying.
Oh, yeah.
You're just talking about us. Sam, I'm having a rough hair day, and I'm looking at it on camera. This is new to me. Usually wear the hat. This is why I wear the hat. But we got the flow going. I figured we'd give it a shot. But what are you gonna do? We got a weird flow going. We got, I'm keeping an eye on this Knicks game, Sam, and it's gotten me excited because I get to root for Knicks basketball for the first time in, who knows how long.
20 years?
Longer. The Devils fans want to be mad, but, there are Knicks fans out there. But did you see that crowd on, what was it, Sunday?
Yeah, it looked like a playoff game to me.
So, as mad as we are, but Devils games. New Jersey announced, thanks to vaccination efforts and all that, we can do 100% capacity, right? It was 100% capacity in New Jersey.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, we are on the way. I think that starts June 4th or something, which is, well before the Devil season starts. So, we are going to be, barring a major setback of unseen proportions, we're going to be to the rafters on opening night. Everyone's stuffing in the Prudential Center. We're going to be able to hug people we've never met before. We're going to high-five people in every row. When Jack Hughes scores that first goal of the season, it's going to be exciting. And I watched this Knicks game. I see the Boo Birds coming out at Trae Young. I see the crazy cheers and the excitement, the chants, and it's crazy. The atmosphere is electric, and I just can't wait for that to happen with hockey again. We got some crowds in some arenas, and it's fine. It's decent. There's some situations that are decent, but 6,000 people compared to 17 or 12 or 14 or whatever, the capacities of these certain stadiums, it just doesn't hit the same. So I think that once we get there and we're cutting close, I'm excited that, I get to meet some of the fans. We get to go to the Prudential Center. We'll do a little podcast on the outside before the game. At is it still Taj Lounge?
Taj Lounge 973. Also, we're pre-planning right now the NHL draft party at Taj Lounge. So, yeah, we already came to an agreement in principle on July 23rd to do something there. Also, June 2nd, which is next week, Tuesday, I'm sure we're going to do something special. Is it Tuesday, June 2nd? I think so. I got my dates all mixed up. But anyway, I just want to say, you talk about crowds. Mm-hmm. I went to the Mets game yesterday. I wanted to see Jacob deGrom. And for the first time in years, I got chills.
Really?
You know what? Yeah. Although there was only 9,000 people there, which is probably capacity right now.
Yeah.
The way things are. 9,000 people. Jacob deGrom comes up to bat. And he's getting MVP chance.
I mean, it's hard to deny
chance. So it's like it's not
this
so
Mets
much.
This team is in first place, and they have, I think you and me are on the injured list.
Yeah, and it's not because it's my Mets or it's Jacob deGrom. It's a sense of normalcy when everybody just gets up, just like the old days, and starts chanting MVP out of nowhere. Yeah. And it gave me chills, even though there was only 9,000 people there. And it's like I haven't had chills like that in a while.
Yeah.
A while, because we're witnessing greatness. The guy's hitting about 500 as a pitcher, and his ERA actually went up to like 0.82, which is insane. But, again, let's get back to the topic at hand, flipping the bird. Honestly, 9 out of 10 times I would not appreciate that. Only because, I'm old school where, kind of shut up and play.
Yeah.
But this team is the Devils, they are so desperate for personality, an identity, and a little nastiness. That little gesture, no pun intended, it made me feel good, actually. Even though I would never, teach my I don't have kids, but I wouldn't teach kids that because I was always taught, you practice the way you play. You always play with class. At the end of the game, you always shake hands. But, I kind of like that attitude. He picked up something. He's like our own. It's like when Ray Shero was dropping F-bombs, allegedly. Then I started to like Ray Shero.
Yeah. And that was the thing, and if people don't remember the story, it was when he, right before he signed Pavel Zacha to extension, there was a rumor that Zacha was thinking about going to the KHL, and he did not have very nice things to say in regards to that. He did curse a little bit. I forget the exact quote, but it was not great. But yeah, I mean, it's that Jersey attitude, and you talked about it then. And I guess I'm a little bit of a hypocrite because I said I liked it then. I liked my general manager embodying that New Jersey attitude when it came to its players, that mob boss-like attitude, Tony Soprano-looking, Jimmy Hoffa-like guy, right? Well, I guess Jimmy Hoffa wasn't the mob guy, but whatever, you know what I mean? Like the mob guy. Hey, how you doing? Hey, you go to KHL, okay? See you later. Get another one. It's fine. So I understand that I said that I liked it then, and then I said I did not like Igor Sharangovich doing it here. But here's the difference, is that Ray Shero did it in a contract negotiation in which he was probably winning because Zacha ended up signing. Igor Sharangovich did it in a game he was losing 4-2. And I feel like, who knows? Who knows what spurned it? He did apologize. He said he was caught in the heat of the moment. Somebody might have said something to him. Somebody might have said something about his mama. Somebody might have said something about his sister. And Sometimes you got to flip the bird to really get your point across when you can't just punch him in the face because IIHF rules have different rules when it comes to fighting.
I think somebody said something, hey, your NHL team sucks. And he took it personally. Yeah.
He would probably just nod because that would not be incorrect. They were pretty terrible this year. But yeah, it was not what I would want my young player who's given this chance to be captain of a young running gun team, not very talented, but he gets to at least show himself as like a leader of a team. There's a couple players over 30 on this team. So he didn't have to be the captain, but they named a 22-year-old captain or is he 23? I think he might be whatever.
He's young. He's young.
A very young player. They named him captain and this is what he does. I just didn't would you want Nico to be flipping people off?
No. Again, it's all in context. And look, if you're losing 4-2, I mean, it's hard to say, because I think we're all hypocrites. We all live in the moments. Look, it was a mistake. He apologized. It's really a non-issue. He hasn't shown anything worrisome on the New Jersey Devils team. He seemed like a player that plays his heart out. Hey, at least I know that Belarus has a hockey team. Yeah. That's something positive out of it.
No, exactly.
And that's like my sleeper team that I want to win, aside from the United States, but, Belarus.
The World Championships have been strange. Yeah, the World Championships was strange. Great Britain won a game today. There's games where teams will win and they'll come back and lose 7-0. Canada lost to somebody weird, right? It's just been dreadful. It's been a weird tournament. So, it's been weird, but at least we get that out of it. We got to see Timo Meier and Nico Hischier showing some chemistry. Maybe that's something to look at in the future. I think the Sharks are going to be trying to just get assets and start over because it's clearly not working what they're doing. And I don't think there's any quick fixes there. So Timo Meier, maybe he's available. At least there's chemistry there. They're both Swiss players, and the Devils like getting the Swiss players. That's why they got Siegenthaler, and that's why they got Mirko Müller in the first place. So there's a lot here, but it's just not. It's not like World Championships in the past, like two years ago. 2 years ago, yeah, because last year was canceled because of the COVID. 2 years ago, we had to watch Jack Hughes, and we got to watch Nico, and we got to watch a couple other players in the tournament. Now it's like some of our big players are like Matt Tennyson, and like Siegenthaler, and like players like that where you're like, I mean, it gives us a rooting interest, sure, but that's so meh. You know what I mean? I'm just not very impressed with that when it comes to watching a product. But, it gave us something to talk about. So we got some Devils news. And, unlike last week when they a couple things happened with the Devils, there wasn't a ton of Devils news this week. So it's interesting. I do want to bring something up, and there's something I'm writing about tomorrow.
Okay.
Well, I wrote it. It's coming out tomorrow. But I was talking about the Calder Trophy race. And looking at the field, I looked at a lot of predictors, people kind of putting their thoughts out there. And I think the top 3 comes out a week from today, I believe. Or maybe a week from yesterday. There's no chance the Devils are going to be in the top 3. Neither Ty Smith or Igor Sharangovich are going to be in the top 3. They're just not going to. Jason Robertson had too good of a year. Kirill Kaprizov had too good of a year. And there's a lot of other players in that next tier. I actually think Shesterkin is going to end up being that third player just because New York Rangers, he's a goalie, yada, yada, yada. But how far might the Devils fall? It might be farther than you think, Sam. Like they might get nobody in the top 5. Neither Ty Smith nor Igor Sharangovich might both get left out of the top 5. And I don't know how exactly that gets fixed because the team was terrible, and you had 2 good rookies. You had 3 if you count Kuokkanen, and they're going to take votes from each other. And I don't think that you can expect. I mean, I'd be surprised if they both fell out of the top 10. But there's 10 good rookies this year, so there's an outside possibility. But the team was terrible. People aren't paying attention. What is your expectations when you look at the Calder Trophy race?
You know, that's a tough one. That's a real. I hate it when you ask hard questions, Nick. There's a lot to love with all these players, but it was such a short season, but I wouldn't even know who to pick. I wouldn't even know who to pick.
Yeah. It is what it is. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but I got a bone to pick though, if you want to hear what I have to say, because I was reading something. I was reading a couple things about Ty Smith, and Sharangovich. Sometimes I read blogs. I don't think it was your blog, but it got me thinking. When Don Mattingly, I know it's baseball, says something about, analytics is kind of screwing the game. Yeah.
Making the game boring and all that. And I'm one guy that likes to read and look analytics, but I never put too much stock in it. And I'm reading a lot of these blogs, and they're just like pulling statistics, from this source and that source. And, this has got to be right because his, GW, there's always an acronym, like GW5645 rating is -2. I'm just making it up. Yeah. And I'm just kind of like, what does that mean? Right? It's like, for me, when I watch hockey, when I scout, because I do scout, I never really look at numbers. I never really look at numbers other than the bottom line, just to see where the team's at or how many goals, assists, the basic stuff. But yeah, I think a lot of times people are just reading so much into it that it's nauseating. And what Don Mattingly, the Florida Marlins manager, said that, it got me thinking, to hell with these numbers. Now, I like a lot of the math guests we've had on, the math guy, and I find it very fascinating, interesting. But at the same time,
Michael McCarty.
Yeah. But I'm at the point right now where I'm so nauseated by some of these blogs I read where all they do is like cite sources and, this statistic and that statistic that I feel like I'm in math class again, and it doesn't feel like it's fun. And I kind of agree with Mattingly. What are your thoughts?
Well, when it comes to baseball, it's ruining baseball. I think it's ruining baseball. The Yankees are terrible to watch, and I love baseball. Baseball is my first sport, my first love, but it's decidedly behind hockey, and it's pretty far behind football. When I look at the sport in general, I like the Yankees more than I like my football team, but I like football a lot more than baseball, if that makes sense. And it takes a lot of the fun out of it that basketball doesn't. Like a lot of basketball is really good advanced stats, like a lot of per 60s and per 100s, and just breaking down the stats per 100 minutes played, just to kind of give you an idea of what one player looks like against another one. And they're also flawed stats just because certain players thrive in those 20-minute roles, but those at least have value and I can calculate it and I can make it make sense. When it comes to hockey, you won't see me using XG. You won't see me using WAR. You won't see me using the stats that I can't personally explain to you how they are calculated, because I just don't. I think you lose some value. I mean, it's fun to talk about on the smallest scales and on the biggest scales, depending on the stats. It's fun to look at certain numbers like XG and say, well, Pavel Zacha's XG was this, and that. That shows that he underperformed this season and he's due for a breakout. It's also nice to look at, the team's XG was this for this game, so they just got a couple unlucky bounces and yada, yada, yada. But to make these wide-standing notions like this player is good or bad, this team is bad or good, when the standings and the stats say different, it's not what these stats are for. Rachel Dory, who, friend of the podcast, a guest we've had on before, she's told me, and I think she's tweeted this out before too, the advanced stats are supposed to prove or disprove what you're watching on television or watching in the arena. You're supposed to be able to look at this game and be like, this guy is good or bad. Let me look at the stats just to see if it proves my argument. And if it doesn't, then you kind of have to look into it a little bit more and be like, okay, well, let me look a bit deeper. If it does, then, you see why this or that is happening. It's supposed to tell you specific things. The problem is that we've tried so hard in hockey to get a general stat. We've wanted that WAR. We wanted the Bill James student handbook, that what it did for baseball at first. But the problem is that advanced stats help baseball for a little while, but I think it's hurt it for the most part, because the game is just blah. And that's why the shift is so prevalent. That's why, that's why people are striking out so much, because a strikeout is better than double play, just on paper. And while that's great, the fact that you just looked at a strike three on the corner makes me want to turn off the game. You know what I mean? And just because you're trying to mitigate that risk. In hockey, it's hard to mitigate the risk just because the game's so fast, but you're making lineup decisions based on these things. And you're making minutes decisions based on these things, because you're saying if he plays this many amount of minutes, this is what's likely to happen. Well, there's a lot of other factors that go into that, and it's hard to make those wide-standing decisions based off a stat alone when it's looking too far into it. There's one, and it depends on how somebody reads the stats. Evolving hockey is different than Mike McCarty's ineffective math, and it's different than elite prospects, the guys over there who look at it. It's different than how Dom Luszczyszyn from The Athletic looks at stats. They look at it a little bit differently. I saw a guy yesterday. I can't remember who it was. I'm sorry that I'm not quoting the right person, but they literally brought up Shea Weber and said, Shea Weber's actually been bad. And then somebody came in the comments and said, no, here's my stats that say he's actually been good. And that's the issue, is that we have two people reading what's supposed to be the same stat, but it comes out differently depending on how it's perceived and how it's calculated. There's certain stats that say the same thing. They're literally calculated differently. So when it comes to the advanced stats, there's a place for them. There's absolutely a place. And if you're good at it, it will make your team better. Teams like Vegas have done really well of using the analytics. Look at that team, that ragtag team, but they had an analytics department that figured out the flaws in all those exposed players. And Seattle's going to do the same exact thing. Seattle's going to do the same exact thing. They're going to find the flaws. Where have you missed on a player who has talent and skill? And you could see that talent and skill on the ice, but you don't see that talent and skill when I look at goals and assists and plus minus and simple counting stats. You know what I mean? So that's where you have to use it. And what advanced stats also has done is it's taken away a lot of the advantages that come with playing good special teams. Michael McLeod, I think he scored no special teams goals this year. So when you compare him to Zacha and Miles Wood, more Zacha, because Wood scored a lot of his at 5-on. When you compare him to Zacha, he looks terrible. It's like, oh man, he's still not that good. I think he scored like 9 goals, and it's like, it's fine. It's better than what it's been, but it's not that good. But when you look at it at the scale that he did all that at even strength, when it's 5-on-5 and there's no advantages that go either way, then it looks a lot better. Then you're like, okay, there's something to build on here, and I think that's where you need to look at this. You need to take these analytics and you need to change the expectations of them. There's people who will completely wipe them off the board because they don't understand them, and you should read Pucks and Pitchforks because I usually explain them in my articles when I use them. If I use Corsi, I explain what Corsi is. If I use Fenwick, I explain what Fenwick is. If I try to leave, my favorite says high danger anything. How many high danger chances did you allow? How many high danger chances did you not allow? And again, that's flawed because it has to do with positioning and some things like that. But, not is there maybe a scant medium danger chance that's better than a high danger chance? Sure. Do medium danger chances go in? Yeah, but high danger chances go in at a much higher percentage. So when I look at the chances that they're allowing, when they're on the ice against the ones that they're getting as a line, and again, there are flaws in everything because that also doesn't account for, line metrics like playing with Jack Hughes definitely is going to help your high danger chances because he creates so much on his own. But it's definitely a way to look at impact on the ice and how, it basically takes away if Mackenzie Blackwood or Aaron Dell or Scott Wedgwood had a bad game, that's going to crush your plus minus. But high danger chances, that had nothing to do with who was in net. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It also has nothing to do with like if a team has a lot of confidence and they're shooting from the point, like those aren't going to go against high danger chances. So there's places for these stats to be. We have to use them intelligently, though.
Yeah. And getting back to what I was saying, merely just reading some of these blogs nowadays, it is just like, oh, well, you've lost me, bro. That's what I'm saying. I'm nothing on Pucks and Pitchforks blog, though. But I'm just saying, I was reading some other blogs, the last 2 weeks, and I'm just like, really? What does that all mean? Are you sure?
Yeah.
And sometimes I'd like to throw some stats in there. One of the like you said, the high danger chances. I like that stat. I like the graphs, like where they're shooting from. When Bryce Salvador gets into that, I find that not only to be entertaining but informative. That's how I develop my no fun zone theory. And also, the stat that I like I wish they would expand on are the hits. What kind of hits? I like the physics of it. I don't think they're analytics, but I'm a big fan of sports science when they go through all the math and physics of when a hockey player hits with what force at how many miles per hour, all that kind of jazz, or can explain it. I'm a nerd like that, but again, some of these blogs I'm reading, I'm just like, you're just basically cut and pasting, and this makes no sense to me whatsoever.
And that's the thing is, I think that, and this probably comes from my news background, just because we have to remember that people watch the news once a week on average, and it's usually for 20 minutes. So you have a person's attention for 20 minutes, and that person isn't valuable. So you can't lose their attention. They're going to go somewhere else.
Yep. So
I have to make sure that you are up to date entirely on these stories. And that's the same thing with a blog. A lot of people Google me and they find me that way. I have a lot of return readers. We get 1,000 people who just show up to the website every day, hoping that there's good content there. And sorry, the guest texted me, so I was just making sure that I texted back.
Oh, well, I'm about to call him soon. You want me to call him?
No. We still got a couple minutes. He just had a question. Okay. But anyway, I have to remember that readers read when they read. There's some return readers who I don't know how to explain it to, but they'll skip the sentence and it'll be fine. We have to continue to constantly, even with something as simple as Corsi. Corsi is chances for against chances against. Take it together and you find a percentage. And honestly, there are some that are egregious one way or the other, whether very high or very low. But most of them end up in the middle because most hockey players, it's like, this much. You got the Connor McDavid, unless it's the playoffs. And you got the Sidney Crosby, unless it's the playoffs. You got the Austin Matthews, unless it's the playoffs before this year. Sorry, that was just cheap shots. But you got the top players up here. You got, the players that are probably not going to be in the NHL next year down here. And then you got everything else right here. It's just like there are outliers, of course. But that's where you got to look. You got to look at the outliers, and you got to see what do those outliers tell me. But yeah, I will say before you get the guest, the Penguins are losing to the Islanders, and that's not good for us, Sam, because that means our first-round draft pick is going up, up, up the draft order.
but that's what Tom Fitzgerald wanted. He said
this is idiotic. That was so dumb. I'll tell him that if I ever get him on. Hey, Tom, why are you rooting for the other team?
It's like, after we just talked about Sharon Govich and classy gestures.
And they're a division rival.
He should be flipping them the bird. He should be flipping them the bird.
Yeah, you hand them, you flip them Palmieri and Zajac, and then on your way out, give them the good old 2-finger salute. What are you doing? What are you doing?
Yes. You just
Where's
tell
Ray
them.
Shero when I need him?
Tell them you want a high number 1 draft pick by flipping them the bird.
Yeah. Oh, you thought you were getting something good. Here you go. This is for you, Lou. There you go, Lou. Oh, killing me. They're killing me. But yeah, head over there. We're going to talk some betting. I'm excited to talk some betting. Yeah. But yeah, that stinks. We really the Oilers lost, so that pick becomes, I think, a 4th rounder. The Penguins lost, so that pick's going from like late teens to mid 20s, if not worse. It's just, and I'll write about this for tomorrow morning, but it did not work out for us this postseason in any way, shape, or form. And so we need a new rooting interest. And let's root to make some money. That's why we got Matt Russell coming on from the Action Network. He's going to tell you where to place your bets, how to place your bets, what you should be looking for, exactly the flaws in the lines. He's going to come on. He writes for the Action Network. You definitely got to go read his stuff. He has a podcast that we're going to talk about too. So I'm excited to have him on. Always love the Action Network. But let's see. I haven't looked at Facebook comments. Who's been watching Worlds? Which Devils players are doing well? Matt Jr. asked that. Matt Jr. We talked about. There's not a lot going on at Worlds. I know Matt Tennyson scored a goal. Matt Hellickson had an assist. There's a couple things going on. Nico Hischier had a couple assists. Igor Sharangovich had an assist today. So Igor Sharangovich is probably the Devils player that's doing the best. But outside of that, it's nondescript. It's not that exciting. The Worlds just didn't do it for me this year. Any more questions? Last time I won a cup, what was a TV channel? I mean, it wasn't that long. What was it, 1984? Was that the last Islanders Cup? It's not, we're not talking about the Flyers here. We're in the 70s. I like to see McLeod work on his shootout shots with his speed. That would be an awesome combo from Steve Tartis. Steve, I think that if McLeod works on his offense this offseason and he just drills it, you might see a very interesting player next season because he's got a lot of the skill sets that the Devils need to really turn this team into something. And he he has to put it together. And once he puts it together, it's going to really look good. So I'm excited to see what McLeod does in the offseason. Let me look at this Penguin score again. Oh, this is over. 2 minutes left. Tristan Jarry really just failed for us. The Penguins couldn't score. Penguins could not score in the last period, so there's just a lot that just went wrong. And there's a lot going wrong in this next game. And this is terrible too. This is all just bad. I'm really upset about this first round pick. Who's going to remember who cares what slot they're in? Who's going to remember if they're 3-5%? I mean, we care what slot they're in, Steve, because we get to pick a better player usually. But Sam's back.
I'm back. Sorry for the little technical difficulties. I was dialing wrong numbers. So other people in the Toronto area probably are like, "Who the heck are you, Sam?"
Oh no.
No. But I got it right. Third try. Third try.
Time's a charm.
Yes, exactly. Pleased to welcome to the State of the Fan address. His name is Matt Russell, Action Network. He is an NHL contributor. Matt, you're on with Sam and Nick. How are you tonight?
Gentlemen, I'm fantastic. No truth to the rumor you guys are trying to call Kyle Dubas to make some deals for the Devils.
I mean, he's in a good mood. So I think
that
now would be the time, right? He might be looking to, Mitch Marner might be on the trading block. Who knows the way he's played.
Well, guys, Alex Galchenyuk is not as good as he looked the other night. So let's stay off the phone trying to get Alex Galchenyuk for a future first round pick or something. Just let that one go. I promise he's not that good.
No, I definitely don't want anything to do with Alex Galchenyuk on this team. I wanted him last year. I do not want him this year, though. But anyway, so Matt Russell, host of the Window Sports Betting Podcast, NHL contributor for the Action Network. We wanted to bring you on because obviously the Devils fans haven't had anything to root for in weeks, and most of our fans are from New Jersey, and one of the major sports betting hubs in the United States. So I want to talk to you about, for those who are looking to take on betting in the playoffs, is like a little bit of a rooting interest. We're not talking about major betting. Nobody's trying to become a professional with this, but have a little fun with it. What should they be looking for? What are some of the things they should look for in a good pick?
Yeah, well, listen, guys, first and foremost, I completely get it. The team of my youth, the Vancouver Canucks, obviously, even though they were still playing hockey games after the playoffs started, of course, that season went awry, probably even quicker than the Devils season did this year. So we've got that in common. And that's how I started betting, right? Like 20 years ago, the Canucks weren't very good for an extended period of time before the Sedins got there. And I needed something to be a little bit more interested in the playoffs with, right? And that's how I got into betting. And 20 years later, here we are. But listen, I mean, that's a sort of a wide open question as there could possibly be. And so just to sort of let you into my process, fundamentally, obviously, what are we trying to do, right? We're trying to score goals. We're trying to predict who's going to score more goals. And you can get lost in that, right? Where you can get lost in goal differential and, all of those sorts of things. So, I am a very advanced metric-based handicapper, if you will, right? So I'm looking for what creates goals. And so for me, expected goals for is a metric that I use a lot. 5-on-5. I'm big on 5-on-5 hockey because, listen, power plays, obviously scoring a goal at any point in time is great, right? And power play is one of the ways that you can score a goal, obviously. But it's not very predictive from one game to the next, right? Because everybody kind of is at about 20%, right, over the course of the season. Well, if you can guarantee me that a team is even going to get 5 power plays in the very next game, then, okay, that's at least starting somewhere, but we also don't know if that's even going to be the case, right? So for me, 5-on-5 play is everything when it comes to handicapping hockey, because if you're good on 5-on-5, you're probably going to draw a lot of penalties. And then you're going to allow that penalty or that power play percentage to kind of take shape, right? If you can get 5, 6, 7 power plays in a game, which you're probably not going to do if you're not very good at even strength. So, from a starting point, I want to know who's good at even strength. So expected goals for is a main metric when it comes to that, and also high danger scoring chances at even strength, right? So a team gets, on average, about 8 high danger chances at even strength in a game. Well, if a certain team averages 9 or 10, I know that they're better than average. If they average 5 or 6, I know that they're below average. And that's where I come from when it comes to trying to figure out who's good and who's maybe a little bit overrated, right? And when it comes to sports betting where, every team gets rated, a money line price is created, so every team has a value. So they obviously have to be either overrated, underrated, or properly rated, right? So I'm looking for underrated teams to bet on. I'm looking for overrated teams to fade, and then just going from there. And it's entirely based, I shouldn't say entirely necessarily, but like 95% of it is based on even strength play.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. So the playoffs where, the Penguins just got knocked out officially. Connor McDavid's Oilers they got knocked out. Capitals are out. We're starting to learn that the Canadians on the brink. The Blues are out. There's a couple teams, that are a lot's happened already. What have we learned from a betting perspective? What have we learned in the playoffs so far?
It's funny, right? Like the sample size, even though you sort of think of it as like a full series, like that should mean something. The sample size really isn't large enough for you to actually learn anything, right? What we come into these playoffs, we already kind of have built what we think of these teams. Like, for example, like you just mentioned the Islanders, right? I'm sitting here sweating out this game. That was a wild first period because I had the Islanders in this series. I had the Islanders on the series line -1.5. So again, needing them to win in 6 games or fewer. So this is a really big game for me as far as them closing it, because my numbers from an even strength standpoint, come out to them being the better team than the Penguins. And I know a lot of people will sort of step back and be like, that's crazy. Like, what are you talking about? But again, when we're counting the stuff that matters to me, the high danger chances, the expected goals for at even strength, the Islanders are just better in all the categories, right? So, if the Penguins had happened to win this series, I don't know that I would have necessarily learned that they were the better team, maybe if they had dominated at even strength throughout, but that's not really the case either, right? Like the Jets, they sweep the Oilers 4-0, but every single game, the Oilers were the better team at even strength, creating more high danger scoring chances at even strength, having more expected goals for at even strength, but the Jets were just able to hang in there, stay in it, and that's what the Jets do, right? The Jets are this like statistical anomaly. The metrics people like me hate them because they don't understand how they win as many games as they do, consistently being outchanced in the high danger areas. And so, like, did I learn anything about the Jets? No, not really, because I always knew that they were a team that could kind of pull that off. That's just what they do. And on the flip side, the Oilers are that team who is going to create all those scoring chances, but still not get it done in the end. So, was there an expectation that the Jets were going to win every single one of those games? I mean, 3 of them were overtime games, and the other one was a 2-1 game where the game-winning goal happened, and we had to wait a full minute before anybody realized that it went in the net. We had to do the whole horn from Toronto thing to stop the game to tell everybody that the puck went in the net, right? Like, it was a lot closer than a sweep really was. But if you look at the metrics, like the Oilers should have been, and rightly so were, favored in every single game. They just lost them. And so, like, did I learn that anything new about the Jets? Not really, right? Because for me, there's still going to be a fade going forward in this playoffs. And so, it's really just kind of creating your numbers based off of the regular season and then just, living and dying with the bounce of the puck. And, we kind of get stubborn with some of this stuff, but at the same time, like, there just isn't enough gameplay in one single series to really change anybody's mind. And hopefully we were right in the first place, right? Same thing with the Boston Bruins. Figured they would have a relatively easy time with the Capitals, and they did. And so the good news is we didn't have to have any hard lessons when it came to that. Now, we might see that with the Nashville Predators here if they can, force a Game 7 and maybe take out Carolina. But, nothing that's happened so far here is like a learning experience for us.
Okay, that makes sense. So we're looking ahead. There's a couple of series that are close. And then there's a couple, places where you can look ahead. What's your strategy right now? Are you looking to maybe bet on a couple of these series that are like? Are you looking to bet on some of the underdogs? Maybe some of the teams that are down 3-2, maybe to make a comeback. Are you looking for a long shot bet on somebody like the Canadians, or are you looking? Are you just kind of betting game to game until you get to the second round?
Yeah, there's going to be a couple of spots here that I sort of have circled. But in general, my strategy is usually underdogs early, favorites late in the playoffs, right? Because what are the NHL playoffs known for, right? Like upsets, anything can happen, all of that sort of thing. But that reputation kind of gets, cemented early on when, back in the day, right? Like a 1 seed would get knocked off by an 8 seed. There's always 1 or 2 upsets. Maybe there's a Cinderella run to the conference final, maybe the occasional run to the Stanley Cup. But, a lot of the times those teams that make that run to the Stanley Cup, it's really just the start of their championship window. Like we saw the Kings win the Stanley Cup as an 8 seed, but we didn't know the Kings were going to be really good for a couple of years after that, right? It wasn't a fluke.
Yeah.
It was the start of something there. So for me, it's underdogs early. Try to find one that, might give somebody trouble because it's the start of the playoffs and you have to catch the really good teams early. Once a team that's really good gets a series under their belt, they obviously get a lot more comfortable and get a lot more, they become a tougher out later on for that underdog type team. And also just variance from a statistical standpoint, right? Like a underdog type team, sort of pick your poison here. I guess in theory you could call the Islanders that. I would sort of lean to the Wild here as my other underdog, my bigger underdog play for the series. And it's like, okay, I think Minnesota matches up against Vegas. The numbers are pretty equal. I'm hoping Minnesota can, force a game 7 here tonight. And then maybe, pull off another, upset in Vegas. The third one would be asking a little bit too much, maybe. But, but then, as the playoffs go along here, right, like that's going to kind of run out, whether you call it luck or just statistical variance. That's the type of thing that's just going to run out. So, I think the cream rises to the top. And in hockey, obviously, you come into the playoffs and you're like, man, there's 6, 8 cup contenders. So inevitably 1 or 2 are going to get knocked out early. And it's the ones that survive late that obviously become a lot more dangerous. And so it's funny, like, as much as I want Minnesota to win this series, and, again, that seems unlikely at this point, but if Vegas goes on, that's a team that I'm actually looking to fade with Colorado because my numbers love Colorado, right? And that's not, that's not news, right? The Colorado Avalanche are really, really good. It's more by degree. Right? So they are that much better than everybody else that maybe I don't think people necessarily pick up on. Because coming into this playoffs, the Vegas Golden Knights and the Colorado Avalanche were right there, sort of 1-2, 1-3 in the Stanley Cup futures market, right? So they were considered relatively equal. I don't see that in my numbers. And so I'll be on Colorado kind of at no matter what the price is. Of course, they're going to be a favorite, so it's not like I'm telling you anything with regards to like, oh, here comes a big underdog or something like that. Like you said, obviously a bunch of different matchups are possible here. So, I can't, I wouldn't even really know where to begin as far as like an upset pick. From a future standpoint, I took Colorado again, like that's a favorite. That's not exciting for anybody. But, I felt like there was a pretty good chance Minnesota could knock off Vegas, which obviously increases the value of Colorado and their path. And this season with the 1-4, 2-3 reseeding, right? Like the number 1 seed, the President's Trophy winner, is going to have the easiest path. And that means something too that I think the market also overlooked. And the other feature that I had was the Boston Bruins. So at this point, right, like all of these numbers are long gone because Colorado's punched their ticket, Boston's punched their ticket, right? Like Winnipeg's punched their ticket to the next round, but like I'm still not, as I mentioned, still not buying the Winnipeg Jets here. So there really isn't anything available, especially kind of midway through the first round here, because obviously the teams that are already in the second round, their odds have been dropped considerably. And the ones that haven't are obviously, with the exception of Toronto, of course, is, still only in Game 5. All these other teams are in a pretty big dogfight here, to just get to the second round. So, it's sort of a tough call from that standpoint. And who knows, right? We may just end up with kind of, all the favorites moving on, with the exception of the Islanders, beating Pittsburgh. But again, I thought the Islanders were better anyway. So, I don't know that there's going to be that Cinderella, underdog team that makes it really, really far this year.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, and that kind of happened last year too. Like there was. I mean, obviously Dallas was not expecting to make the final, but right. I bought the Tampa Bay Lightning at +6.5, or plus 650. And I just thought it was the best bet. They were by far the best, most talented team. There's other teams that could have won it, sure, but when you look at a weird tournament like in the bubble, and I thought talent and there wasn't a lot of those outside factors that might have hurt Tampa in the past. So that's why I went with Tampa last year. But when I looked at the field this year, oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, sorry. It was easier also last year because I was right there with you to map out their path, right? Because Eastern Western Conference, we had that setup where you look at all the other teams in the Eastern Conference last year, and you go, okay, Boston, Rask has gone home. The Leafs are out in the in the qualifying round. Kind of what's left as far as the quality teams. Whereas in the West, it's just an absolute sweepstakes, right? Where it's Blues and Avalanche and Vegas, and it's and then Dallas gets out of there. But you're man, there's a lot of really good teams there. This year, we don't know what those conference finals, if you will, because obviously they don't exist. But we don't know what those matchups are going to look like. So it's really hard to map out the path for these teams, which has a lot to do with how you value a futures bet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it's semifinals this year or whatever they decide to call it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. So when you're looking at the field, who's left? You mentioned the Bruins. You mentioned the Avalanche. But who's somebody you're is the Avalanche the team you're riding or dying with? Is that the team that you're looking to you're looking to make bets on every single night, and then you're also looking to make bets long-standing bets on, or are their odds too high right now to even look at futures bets on them?
Yeah, it's funny, right? Because that first round, I make my numbers, right, and I come up with a win probability for the series, and I saw a lot of people in the metrics community talking about how Colorado was a 90% win probability for the series against St. Louis. And people would be like, oh, man, that's way too high. This is hockey. That's crazy. What's wrong with you? And I didn't have the heart. I didn't have the guts to tell anybody that, I had them at 94%. I had them even higher than that because it's hockey. And, I'm the same way. I'm as soon as they drop the puck, man, everybody's a professional out there. And so, there kind of can't be. And so the way I put it on my podcast, I just said to people, it's there's kind of infinity value on Colorado, right? Any bet that you make that has Colorado succeeding actually has value, but it's up to you in your sort of risk management to be yeah, I'm okay laying, minus 400 or 500 on a series price. That's still value from a win probability standpoint. If you believe that my 94% or was even in the, neighborhood, but it's I still don't really want to do that because, stuff happens, and that's a lot of weight to lay to win back one unit. And so when you say sort of ride or die, for me, it's more of a long-term thing based on the way that I think it's best case scenario, obviously for Colorado from a path standpoint, but game to game, no, not really. I mean, maybe for this Vegas series, if that happens, and there might be at, a minus 160 game price or something like that. That is something that I can claim value, and I can also recommend that, and I don't think people should have a problem laying that kind of a price, right? If it comes out that it's minus 300, then now again, still some value, but I don't know that I would necessarily say to somebody, hey, let's lay that down. So it's kind of a different category. From a game to game standpoint, again, depends on the matchup, right? I bet basically, with the exception of game 2, every game on the Islanders. I've bet every game of this Minnesota Wild series. And now I'm only 2-3 right now in that, but I won the 2 that were plus 160. So 2 plus 160s equals 3.2. I lost 3 units, when they lost. So I'm still up a tiny bit on this series, even though they're down 3-2. And so from a game to game standpoint, I'm looking for those, small underdogs, hopefully a little bit smaller than plus 160, or these sort of pick 'em type games to play game after game after game. So, like I said, I've got Boston and Colorado in more of a long-term situation here. Again, we'll see what the price is for the Islanders and the Bruins. I'm hoping that knocking off the Penguins maybe adds a little value for the Bruins here because people think highly of the Islanders. And it's not that I don't, but I think, that's a tough matchup for the Islanders, right? Because the Bruins do what the Islanders do. They just do it a little bit better. So there's a possibility it's Boston in every game in that series, but I've already got them to win the East, right, to come out of the East. I've already got them for the Stanley Cup, so I'm already pretty invested in the Bruins in general, in the same way that I am with the Avalanche. You know, as mentioned, I do not like the Jets, so it's going to take a crazy price for me to get behind the Jets against the Leafs. And then the one series, you know, whoever comes out of listen, both these series, right, are still up for grabs in the Central. That's one where I may be playing it on a game-to-game basis. And, you know, obviously with all the different permutations still on the table, like it's hard to even begin to sort of say who I would be backing in every one of those games, because again, who's going to be there? What's the price going to be? Right? It's still just absolutely up in the air in that Central division.
All right, so now I want to look far ahead. As a bettor, looking towards next season, this is the Let's Go Devils podcast. So I got to ask you a Devils question. What would the Devils have to do this offseason to get you to consider betting for them next season? It doesn't have to be a Stanley Cup win, but even like a make the playoffs bet, a division bet, something. What do the Devils have to do to get you to put them in your purview? Okay.
Well, so there's good news and there's bad news with the Devils, right? So the good news is obviously they missed the playoffs. That sucks. But like the good news is their 5-on-5 play for my numbers and sort of my predictive model was actually pretty good relative, right? Like I only have them as 3% below average. And for a team, that missed the playoffs, like, you would take that, right? Like you should be kind of going like, oh, that's not bad, right? Like that's not bad at all. Obviously, when I see that and I go, and I don't even have to look, right? But I see that and I go, okay, 3% below average at even strength. Then I look at their record and where they are in the standings, and I already know, right? The special teams went badly, right? I don't even have to look, right? I know that either penalty kill or power play was dreadful, and probably both. Right, for them to sort of not be able to take advantage of being, again, around league average from a 5-on-5 standpoint. But the good news is, right, like that's a pretty good base. That's a pretty good framework to start from for a team that, let's be honest right now, is in the talent acquisition phase of the franchise, right? And, like you want to be one of two teams, right? There's two types of teams. There's either, the team that is going to drive you insane, or there's the team who you have to drive insane, right? So we just watched the Islanders, right? They're the team that drives you insane to play against.
Yeah.
And the Penguins are the team that you need to drive insane in order to beat, right? And like you would take either one of those and sort of take your chances, because sometimes the Blues win the Stanley Cup and sometimes the Capitals win the Stanley Cup. And of course, those two teams are on that that each side of that spectrum. So, listen, I don't know the roster up and down. Obviously, I know the star players involved. You're going to get a full season out of Nico Hischier. Obviously, they think highly of him to make him captain. People are talking Datsyuk comparisons. That's awesome. Obviously, Jack Hughes, is a key element of this. Is he going to be the Zetterberg to Datsyuk? Who knows, right? But it's still a talent acquisition thing. But as you do that, if you can improve the power play, it doesn't have to. The even strength doesn't have to get that much better, I guess is my point. And that's kind of the good thing, right? Where if you can go from 3% below average in my rating to 1% above and just get the penalty kill, which, listen, by and large is scheme and attitude, and get, a little bit better on the power play, which again is just a little bit more talent and maybe a bit of a better plan. And those things kind of just get back to even, average. Now you're looking at a team that I'm willing to bet on, because if those two things happen, they're going to happen under the radar, right? The NHL, the sports books, and the bettors aren't going to look at New Jersey as this team that is underrated. They're going to look at just the New Jersey Devils as this team that, it's been a couple years since they made the playoffs, and, they're not that great, or blah, 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 blah. Obviously, getting a better season out of Blackwood would help too. And so all of these things are very doable things. And so it wouldn't take all that much for them to be that live underdog. And so this season, like that team for me was the Ottawa Senators and the Detroit Red Wings. And both those teams missed the playoffs, but we were getting plus 200s on a regular basis on their games. And those two teams were just scrappy enough that they were able to be profitable betting on those teams. And when you're betting on hockey, especially the regular season, you want profitable underdogs. And the Devils fit that category as sort of a team to watch for next year. And the good news is, like I said, the stuff that they need to do to be that team for me isn't that far away from them.
Okay. I like that. I like that positivity. That's getting me excited. I'm ready. Can the season start already? How far are we away from October? All right.
Well, where are you? Like, do you feel like that's doable as a better, you guys know, is that doable? Like, can this power play get better? Can the penalty kill get better? Can the talent be there? Can, Mackenzie Blackwood be better? Like, is this a team? You tell me, should I be better on this Devils team, or are you really sour on it?
I think you should bet on things like the over/under. I think they're going to hit over on the wins because I think you're right. Vegas is just going to ignore them no matter what they do because they're not going to do something like sign Ovechkin, even though I'm going to write about it, and they're not going to do something like trade for Patrick Laine, even though I'm going to write about it. They're not going to make these big moves because that's just not what Fitzgerald wants to do unless it gets literally handed to him, like thrown on a silver platter. I think he wants to develop, and I think that's worked because it worked with Sharon Govich. It's worked with Jack Hughes is a much better player. You got guys like Yanni Kuokkanen. Miles Wood is a much better player. You have a lot of young youth, and I think people are going to go into next season thinking the Devils are going to be like what they thought Ottawa was this year. There's a couple interesting pieces. Maybe they would do something like a mid-level signing. So, something not crazy, but but they're not signing Dougie Hamilton. I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't think that's what they're looking for because the timeline doesn't match.
Right? And they shouldn't, right? Like, you want to build, right? Like, all of these teams, I always sort of say in football, right? Like, as soon as a guy plays on his second team in the NFL, like, it's starting to be over for him, right? Like, there's a reason that team let him go. And so when we're talking about nucleuses of teams, these guys don't come available. And if they do, then you have to think of them as a second tier type of player, right? Like, there's a reason Laine didn't, make it as long with his team as Austin Matthews did with his team, right? Obviously those two guys linked in hockey history from a draft standpoint. And so, I wouldn't add any of those guys, right? When I say talent acquisition, right, it's entirely grassroots, drafting, and just building from there, and then adding what you're missing, right? We've seen the Tampa Bay Lightning add toughness on the sort of periphery to the core that they already had, and that's what you got to do, right? You want to find out what your team is. If you find out that your team is like the Islanders, and they have a ton of depth, and they have a great fourth line that they can roll out there, and nobody plays like an insane amount of minutes, and it makes everybody better, then that's cool too, man. You can go a long way with that, but you have to allow the ingredients here to cook a little bit. And again, tough that, Hischier didn't get to play the entire season. And so you didn't get to necessarily get that pot bubbling, if you will, a little bit. But yeah, like I said, with the Ottawa Senators, right? Like, you look around, you watch their games, you go, man, there's a lot of young talent on this team. And if the Devils are, say, 1 year behind the Ottawa Senators, like, that's not that bad because the Ottawa Senators are going to listen, if the season was 30 more games or 25 more games, the Ottawa Senators would have made the playoffs this year.
That's an interesting point. And I like that. I think that the Devils are in a good spot to surprise some teams. The division's kind of hard, especially when Carolina slots back into that next year. But they overcame that a little bit when they were at their best this year. So I think that they can do it again. But, Matt, I want to give you a sec just to, plug your podcast, plug your work at Action Network. What do you got coming up?
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So for the Action Network, obviously deep into the recesses of the playoffs, we did a massive playoff preview that, listen, you can go back, you can still listen to it. There's tons of still legitimate, valuable stuff. It was aimed in a lot of cases to the novice bettor. So if anybody out there is listening to this going like, yeah, I'm barely into betting hockey for the playoffs, just as you sort of, set things up, you can go back and check that out. I write basically about one game a day for the Action Network. As for my podcast, it's called The Window Sports Betting Podcast. You can get it wherever you get podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Apple, all, the usuals, if you will. And it's a daily podcast, about, half an hour to an hour each day, depending on the season and how much is going on. There's, obviously NFL is probably our biggest thing, to be completely honest with you. College basketball. And then, of course, once hockey gets serious, here we are. And that's every day, Monday to Friday, giving out plays, talking about why we're playing those plays, and then talking about them the next day. right? And I don't think a lot of places do that, especially in the sort of early stages of, legalization, if you will, right? It's all about, everybody's got a bet, but nobody's willing to be accountable to that bet. And no one's willing to talk about it the next day. So it's a lot of what happened last night, what's going on tonight. And it's just sort of this daily thing that, if you're in the community and you're in the flow of it, it's just this really fun thing. And, as a side note, we do pretty well over the course of a long period of time. So that's always fun too.
You got to follow the smart money. The smart money is that Matt Russell. Matt, I'm sure we'll have you on again. We're going to have to bring you back on maybe right before the Stanley Cup Finals to give us your little Stanley Cup Final preview. But thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, appreciate it so much. Happy to come on anytime you guys want.
Thanks, Matt. That's Matt Russell.
Right, you heard
Network.
It, Sam. You heard it.
Yeah.
We got to take all of our Dogecoin money. Take it out.
Well,
we got to put it on the Devils, and then we got a plane.
Well, you know what? I was about to interrupt and say, Matt, we're a hedge fund team. Can I short this team every game and make some money? Can I short the New Jersey Devils?
Can we have everybody else bet on the other teams so the Devils' odds go higher? And then we can take those higher odds, and then they go lower. And then we sell the ticket when the odds go lower. Yeah, we got it. It's a circle of life. We're gonna get the plane, Sam. We're gonna get the plane.
After last season and the last couple seasons, I'm always like, sell the team.
They're never gonna sell.
I was while you were doing the interview, I'm just watching the Islanders, and I'm just like, I was actually daydreaming. Hey, how can I get tickets to Nassau? I want to watch my team. Zajac and Palmieri and Green and my GM
Lou
actually do something. Yeah, you know what? And I'll tell you what, that debate about Brendan Shanahan getting permission from Joshua Harris to talk to Lou, back then I was kind of like, and everyone can make their argument. Hey, he was overdue, and it was time for him to go. Let me tell you, I hope Fitzgerald knows what he's doing. I hope the bad luck stops. But in 3 years from now, if we're still stuck in neutral and Lou's got 1 or 2 cups, the pressure is gonna build. And I'll tell you what.
You know who would be happy?
Who?
Tom Fitzgerald, because he's rooting for the Islanders.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. Forgot about that. Hey, you know what? At the same time, look, we understand that was a classy gesture.
Yeah.
It's just the optics of a frustrated fan that doesn't want to hear it.
No, exactly.
I'm not saying that Tom Fitzgerald did a bad thing. We just got to be clear, because sometimes you, the audience, listening or watching us, wherever you are, be like, "Oh, Woo hates Fitzgerald because he said that." No.
And then when we inevitably get Tom Fitzgerald on the podcast,
yeah,
they're gonna be like,
"That's where
call him out like you did. Say it like a man. Say it to his face." No, come on, get out of here. You're not allowed on the plane.
Look, there's one thing I will say, though. The Devils got a hockey guy in charge. We talked about analytics before. Mm-hmm. That's why I have faith in Fitzgerald, because he knows the game better than anyone. He played. He played on some great teams. He was always a leader. He was always a leader on a lot of these teams. One of my favorite teams he was on was the '96 Florida Panthers, when they threw the rats out on the ice. Underdogs. John
I just wrote about
Van
that
Beesbrook. Yeah, that team was fun. Jovanovski.
Yeah.
Scott Mellenby. He was the one that killed the rat. The infamous Miami Arena.
He shot it at the wall.
Yeah, so, you know.
It was. I think it was called the Miami Arena. I think that's what it was called back then.
Well, you know what? I forgot who.
In Miami.
I think it was John. Was it John Woodson, the Knicks former Knicks coach, said when he first got. Yeah, Mike Woodson. Yeah, I'm thinking John Wooden. Anyway, so Mike Woodson, I think it was him that said, or was it the other guy? I don't know. Said that when he first started coaching under Pat Riley, that was the one thing he hated was, watching tape, video, and scouting, and having to sit in a room with a bunch of mice or rats running around. He hated that arena.
That's funny.
Yeah,
that's funny.
I'm sure Ronnie Cycli would have been a better player had they not had that problem. But
that must be it. But anyway, we got to wrap up the podcast. We're getting late. We're doing a late one tonight. I'm just going to do a plug real quick. So I got that piece coming out tomorrow on the Calder race and kind of what that means, and then I have surprise! Guess who's back, Sam?
Who?
Vinny Parisi has a piece coming out tomorrow. So I think he talked about Nico. I'm going to be editing that piece. And then I got a piece where I kind of assess, we've been talking a lot about punishments, and the Devils' punishment came into my purview for the Ilya Kovalchuk contract. So I kind of look at it and I compare it to other punishments for other teams and kind of look at the little Lightning situation and compare it to that. So that's coming out tomorrow morning. You got lots of content. There's content coming out. There's going to be at least 3 pieces a day up until the end of the month coming out. So there's going to be content on pucksandpitchforks.com. I can guarantee it. And
absolutely.
Sure
and you've been a writing machine lately. Go to pucksandpitchforks.com. Oh, and Vinny Parisi is back.
He's back.
We'll be back next Wednesday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Enjoy the Memorial Day holiday. Till next time, let's go Devils.